The council chambers of the Avenari Compact rose in 7 tiers of pale stone, each tier representing a species older than human written language. At the apex stood the speaker's dais, where Vexter of the Kethari let his long fingers drift along the carved railing. His amber pupils narrowed as he surveyed the assembly. 300 delegates from 41 civilizations leaned forward. "The humans," Vexter said, and the chamber's translators carried his voice into every diplomatic ear, "have begun to forget their place." A low rumble passed through the tiers. Councillor Malthain of the Drevani folded 6 arms across his armored thorax and clicked agreement. Even the soft-spoken delegate of the Lyrian Republic, usually the loudest voice for restraint, said nothing. "They expand beyond their permitted corridor," Vexter continued. "They mine the iron belt without our consent. They refuse the tribute schedule and answer our envoys with mockery. A small correction is required. Not a war, a lesson." The Drevani councillor leaned forward. "Where?" "Tethys Station." Vexter's mouth twisted into something close to satisfaction. "A research outpost, 80,000 civilians, mostly scientists, teachers, children. A soft target with no military value, loud enough to be heard on Earth, quiet enough to deny." The vote took less than half a span. 41 species, and only the Lyrian delegate abstained. The motion carried. Tethys Station sat in the third orbit of a yellow dwarf, ringed by gentle dust and a million memories. Lieutenant Rhea Voss was off-duty when the alarms began. She had been writing a letter to her younger brother on Earth, telling him about the sunrise on the station's outer terrace and how the light fell across the lab where her wife worked. She never finished the sentence. The first Kethari cruiser dropped out of slipspace less than 10,000 kilometers above the station. The second came in below the ecliptic. By the time Tethys's automated defenses registered the threat, 6 warships had ringed the colony in a perfect noose. Rhea saw the flash through the terrace window. Then the floor lifted underneath her and threw her into a wall. The lights died. Atmospheric warnings shrieked in 3 languages. Through the haze of dust she crawled toward the calm spire, dragging a leg that no longer answered her. In the corridor she passed children. She passed her wife's lab door, half-melted and silent. She did not stop. She could not stop. She had something to do. In the chambers of the compact, Vexter watched the live feed on a private channel. He watched a city of glass and gardens become a smear of fire. He watched Kethari interceptors strafe a hospital. He watched a docked passenger ferry break in half and spill its passengers into hard vacuum. He felt nothing close to regret. The Kethari had performed this duty across 100 worlds. Pre-flight species were like rivers. They needed banks, or they flooded everything. "Send the recording to Earth's diplomatic channel," he ordered. "Let them watch. Let them remember." His aide hesitated. "And if they retaliate?" Vexter laughed. It was a dry sound like sand poured through reeds. With what? 300 patrol frigates and a planetary defense grid. Their largest battle wagon couldn't crack a Kethari escort. He turned away from the screen. "The humans will mourn. They will rage in their little parliaments. They will write speeches. And in a month, they will deliver the tribute they owe and pretend this never happened." Far below, in the smoking ruin of a calm spire, a woman with a shattered leg pressed the broadcast key. Her left eye was swollen shut. Her uniform was black with blood that was not entirely hers. She spoke into the relay and her voice was steady. "This is Lieutenant Rhea Voss of Tethys Station, recording sensor logs, identification of attacking vessels, and final transmissions of all personnel, sending to Earth on every channel I have left." She paused. Somewhere above her, a Kethari gunship was descending. She could hear the engines. Tell my brother to remember the sunrise." The transmission ended. The sensor data hurtled toward Saul at light's pace, an arrow already loosed, and behind it the gunship's targeting beam painted the ruin red. Part 2, Ashes of Tethys. The signal reached Earth 9 hours after Tethys went dark. It arrived first at Lunar Relay 3, where a tired analyst named Marisol Aguirre was on her last shift before maternity leave. She watched the data unspool across her console, flight identifiers, weapon signatures, the final voice log of a young officer asking her brother to remember a sunrise. Marisol read it twice. Then she pressed the priority key and sent it climbing the chain. Within 40 minutes, the recording reached The Hague. Within an hour, it reached the Joint Strategic Command in Geneva. Within 2, it reached the desk of Admiral Talia Hayes, who was eating cold noodles at her kitchen table in Annapolis. Hayes set down her chopsticks. She watched the video to its end without blinking. Then she rewound it and watched again, then again. She did not weep. She did not curse. She picked up a secure handset and dialed a number that did not officially exist. Authorization Hollow Lantern Hayes Talia Admiral code follows. She read 14 syllables in a flat voice. Wake them up, all of them. We move in 72 hours. She hung up. She washed her bowl. Then she sat at the table and let herself feel one thing, a quick, sharp grief for a lieutenant she had never met. She allowed it 60 seconds. After that she stood, put on her uniform and went to work. The recording leaked. It was not supposed to leak. 3 different agencies had classified it within minutes of receipt. But somewhere between Lunar Relay 3 and The Hague, a copy slipped through a side channel into the public net, and by sunrise on the Pacific seaboard it had been viewed 2 billion times. There were no riots. There were no torchlight marches in the streets. That was the strange thing, the thing that journalists would later try to describe and fail. Earth simply went quiet. In Lagos, a teacher canceled her lesson and stood at the window of her classroom watching her students play. In Buenos Aires, a shipyard welder kept working but stopped joking with his crew. In Mumbai, a grandmother who had survived 2 famines and a flood lit a candle for a woman she had never met, and her wife she had never met, and the children she had never met. The world did not howl. It listened. It listened the way a forest listens before a wildfire, every leaf still, every animal alert. In Tokyo, an old man who had served 3 terms as prime minister was asked by a journalist what he thought Earth would do. He smiled very slightly and said only, "We will be patient for a little while." In the compact chambers, the mood was celebratory. Vexter sipped fermented honey from a long-stemmed cup and accepted congratulations from a dozen delegates. The Drevani counselor presented him with a ceremonial blade, an old Cathari custom marking a successful disciplinary action. The Lyrian delegate, the one who had abstained, did not attend the celebration. The intelligence officer of the compact, a thin Cathari named S. Hari, approached Vexter at the edge of the banquet hall. "Speaker, Earth has not responded." "As predicted." "Not entirely as predicted." S. Hari's voice was low. "There has been no statement, no diplomatic note, no outraged broadcast, no appeal to the Lyrian Republic for arbitration, no request for an emergency session." Vexter frowned. "Their leaders are mourning. They will gather themselves and protest in a few days." "Perhaps," S. Hari watched the speaker's face carefully, "but human governments do not normally mourn quietly. They use grief. They make it loud. This silence is the silence of a defeated people. Or of a planning one." Vexter laughed, but the laugh was thinner than before. He set down his cup. "S. Hari, show me their fleet movements." The intelligence officer produced a thin tablet. On it, the entire visible human navy was displayed, 312 vessels, every patrol frigate and every battle wagon, all in their assigned positions. Not one had moved. "You see," Vexter said, "they have nothing to send." S. Hari looked at the tablet for a long while. He had been an intelligence officer for 60 years. He had survived 3 internal purges and 1 civil war. His instincts had kept him alive when the instincts of better men had failed. "Speaker," he said quietly, "what if the ships we can see are not the ships we should be watching?" Vexter's amber eyes flicked up. The banquet hall noise seemed to fade a little around him. He opened his mouth to answer. The chamber lights flickered. Across the hall, a delegate's communicator began to chime, then another, then another. In a rising chorus of alarms from 6 different sectors of Cathari space. Vexter's hand tightened around the stem of his cup. The glass cracked. Part 3: The Silence of Earth. 11 kilometers beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean, a steel-walled corridor stretched 200 meters long. Admiral Talia Hayes walked it alone, her boots making a soft tap against the deck plates, her uniform pressed into knife edges. At the end of the corridor stood a door no civilian had ever seen. It opened for her. Beyond the door lay a hangar so vast that its far wall vanished into mist. Suspended in dark water beyond reinforced glass were the ships of Project Hollow Lantern. There were 80 of them. Each one was built from a metal alloy that did not exist on any periodic table the Compact had ever published. Each carried weapons systems whose principles had been classified for 40 years. They had been built in secret in pieces, on the floor of the ocean, by crews who had spent decades signing their lives away to non-disclosure. They had been launched and recovered, trained and tested, in conditions no alien sensor could penetrate. The Compact's intelligence services had counted 312 human warships. The actual number was 392. Hayes stood at the observation window and let herself look. Then she turned to the small group of officers waiting behind her, Captain Olufemi Adekanal, Commander Iniakutes Castellanos, Strike Group Leader Daichi Watanabe. Each commanded a wing. Each had been awake for fewer than 4 hours. "You've seen the recording," Hayes said. Each of them said yes. "You've read the target list." Each of them said yes. "You'll keep collateral under 1%. You'll spare civilian centers. You will not touch a single non-military world." Her voice did not rise. "We are not them. We will not become them. Are we clear?" "Clear, Admiral." "Then board your ships. Launch is in 58 minutes. They saluted. They turned. They walked toward their lives or their deaths and made no fuss about which it would be. Hayes remained at the window a moment longer. She thought about a lieutenant in a broken comm spire. She thought about a brother somewhere on Earth who had received a final transmission about a sunrise. She allowed herself another 60 seconds. Then she went to her chair. In the compact chambers, the celebration had ended. Vexter paced the speaker's dais while 3 intelligence officers laid out conflicting reports across the central table. A Cathari forge world named Kurtava had gone dark in mid-transmission. So had the orbital shipyard at Valesh. So had the supply depot at Threnor 9. 6 locations had ceased contact within a single span. "Solar flares," one officer suggested. 6 simultaneous flares, Eshari's voice was flat, on 6 worlds that are nowhere near each other. "A coordinated rebellion. The Threnor separatists have been. The Threnor separatists have 11 freighters and a grudge. They could not silence a candle in a closet, let alone a forge world." Vexter stopped packing. "What are you saying, Eshari?" The intelligence officer hesitated. He had spent his life building careful answers. He chose to abandon that habit. "I am saying that the humans are inside our space. I am saying that they have hit us in places we believed they could not reach, with weapons we did not know they had, and that our reports have stopped arriving because there is no one left at those stations to send them." The chamber was full of delegates again, 300 of them. The Drevani counselor's mandibles clicked once and went still. The Lyrian delegate, who had returned without anyone noticing, leaned forward. Vexter reached for the dais railing. He needed something to hold. "How many ships?" "Unknown." "What class?" "Unknown." "What is their objective?" Eshari looked at the speaker, then at the chamber. He drew in a slow breath. "Speaker, they are not invading. They are not occupying. They are striking purely military assets, forge worlds, shipyards, command stations. The recorded death tolls are almost entirely uniformed personnel. Then they are sparing civilians. They are sparing civilians." The Lyrian delegate spoke for the first time since the vote. His voice carried no triumph, only weight. Then they are telling us something, Speaker. They are showing us the difference between what they could have done and what we did. Vexter's amber eyes locked onto the Lyrian. The honey cup, still in his hand, slipped from his fingers and shattered against the dais. Outside the chamber's high windows, far above Council Prime's atmosphere, a single point of light appeared where no light should be. Then a second. Then a third. A human shuttle was approaching the most heavily defended diplomatic station in the known galaxy, and no one, not one of the Compact's 7 defense rings, had been able to stop it. Part 4: Ghosts in Their Skis. 3 hours earlier, in the void above the Cathari forge world of Kurtava, a section of empty space had folded inward and disgorged 6 warships. They came out silent, no slipspace flare, no transponder, no drive-wake signature on any frequency the Cathari knew to monitor. The lead vessel was a long, dark shape that looked less like a ship than a wound in the sky. The Earth Navy called the class the Wraith Line. Hollow Lantern had built 14 of them. Commander Iniacutes Castellano sat in the bridge chair of the Hadrian's Wall and watched the forge world rotate beneath her. Kurtava manufactured the spinal cannons of every Cathari battlecruiser. 41 orbital platforms ringed the planet. 2 full Cathari battle groups patrolled the local space. She studied her tactical board for 9 seconds. Targeting solution complete, Commander, her gunnery officer reported. All ships fire on my mark. Her voice was even. Mark. The Wraith Line carried weapons the Compact had never catalogued. They were called pinch beams in Earth's classified literature, focused gravitational tears that lasted less than a microsecond and collapsed whatever they touched into a fist-sized point of compressed matter. They did not produce explosions. They did not produce heat. They produced absence. 6 wraiths fired. 41 orbital platforms ceased to exist in the same instant, replaced by drifting marbles of crushed metal that would orbit Kurtava forever as silent monuments. The 2 Cathari battle groups turned to engage. Castellanos' escorts launched. The engagement lasted under 9 minutes. The Cathari fought with the discipline of veterans and the courage of warriors who had never lost. They had no answer for ships they could not see, weapons they could not measure, and tactics built around their own doctrine after 40 years of patient study. Castellanos lost 2 corvettes. The Cathari lost 82 warships. When the surrendering Cathari command vessel transmitted its codes, Castellanos accepted. She ordered her Marines to board, evacuate the wounded to life pods, and tow the hulk to a Lagrange point. She did not strike the forge world's planetary surface. She did not touch the civilian habitats. She did not fire on the shipyard workers' housing district. She did burn every keel laid in the orbital docks. She did burn the command station. She did burn the warship registry archive. By the time the Compact's intelligence services had registered the silence from Kurtava, the same scene had played out in different shapes, with different captains, across 5 other Cathari military hubs. On Earth, the planetary networks remained quiet. No celebrations, no televised speeches. The president of the United African Federation issued a single sentence at a morning press briefing. We have spoken to the Compact in the only language they have demonstrated they can hear. A reporter raised a hand. What is your next move? The president looked at her for a long moment. Patience, she said, for a little while longer. She walked away from the podium. In a hospital ward on the Sol station of Phobos, Lieutenant Rhea Voss opened her eyes. She did not know how she was alive. The last memory she had was the sound of a Cathari gunship engine descending, and a calm white moment when she had decided that she was ready. A medical officer leaned over her with a soft voice. Easy, Lieutenant, you're on Phobos. We pulled you out 3 days ago. Pulled me? A special operations team. They went in after your transmission. We didn't find many survivors. We found you under a collapsed cooling tower in a maintenance crawlspace. You dragged yourself half a kilometer. Rhea stared at the ceiling. She did not remember any of that. My wife, she said, Her voice was a rasp. The medical officer's expression was gentle and honest. He did not lie. She closed her eyes. She did not cry. The tears would come later when there was room for them. Right now there was only a slow, low fire in the center of her chest, and a name on her tongue. "Tell me," she whispered, "tell me what Earth is doing." The medical officer hesitated. He glanced at the window of the ward, where a thin smear of Mars hung in the dark. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "Earth is not doing anything yet. Earth has already done it. The recordings are coming in now." He turned a small wall screen toward her. She watched. She watched a Cathari forge world fall silent. She watched orbital platforms vanish from existence. She watched a compact battle group lower its colors. She watched a human commander refuse to strike a civilian habitat even after every law of vengeance said she had earned the right. Ria Voss, who had crawled a half-kilometer with a broken leg to make sure the truth reached home, watched her people answer for her. She found that she was, after all, able to weep. Part 5. The Diplomat at the Door. Council Prime hung at the gravitational center of the compact's territory, a station the size of a small moon, ringed by 7 concentric defense grids, patrolled by 60 cruisers from 12 different species. No vessel was permitted to approach without 3 layers of authentication, 2 diplomatic clearances, and a Cathari escort. The human shuttle did not request authentication. It did not transmit clearances. It did not accept an escort. It simply did not appear on any sensor until it was already inside the inner ring. At the helm sat diplomat Aurelia Brandt. She was 61 years old. She wore a charcoal suit with no insignia. Her hair was silver, pulled into a low knot. On the seat beside her was a single black case that contained one item, a thin recording chip the size of a fingernail. She had been a diplomat for 33 years. She had negotiated 3 treaties, ended 2 minor wars, and once spent 9 months living in a hut on a moon she could not pronounce, learning the dialect of a fishing people whose civilization the compact had never bothered to catalog. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her shuttle touched the docking arm of Council Prime with the gentleness of a bird landing on water. The clamps closed. The airlock cycled. In the chamber far above, Vexter received the news on a side channel and went very, very still. "Send her in," he said. His chief of security stared. "Speaker." "Send her in." Brandt walked through the corridors of Council Prime with her case in her left hand and a small bow for every species she passed. She had memorized the etiquette of 41 cultures. She used the correct one for each guard she encountered. Several of them found themselves bowing back before they had thought about it. The main chamber doors opened. 300 delegates turned to watch her enter. She crossed the floor without hurry. She stopped at the petitioner's circle, a low ring of pale stone set 30 paces from the speaker's dais, where every species that had ever sought audience with the compact had stood. The Lyrian Republic had stood there once. The Drevani had stood there. Even the Cathari, long ago, had stood there. No human had ever stood there before. Brandt set down her case. She straightened. She looked up at Vexter, and her dark eyes were calm and entirely without performance. "Speaker of the Avanari Compact," she said. Her voice carried through the chamber translators in 41 languages at once. "I am Aurelia Brandt, plenipotentiary of the United Terran Federation. I am here to negotiate the terms of your continued existence." The Drevani counselor made a sound that translators did not bother to render. Vexter leaned forward over the railing. He had practiced his expression. It almost worked. "Diplomat Brandt." His voice was carefully even. "You are bold. You enter our chambers alone with no escort, no fleet at your back, and you speak as if you hold the leverage." "I do hold the leverage." "You hold a recording chip and a small case." "That is correct." The Drevani counselor's mandibles clicked. "Speaker, this is theater. We have 8 more battle groups at our disposal. We have 20 client species. Even if 6 forge worlds have been damaged, we are not broken." "You are not broken," Brandt agreed, without turning. You are being shown the courtesy of being given a choice. That is the difference between the Tethys footage and the recordings you have been receiving for the last 6 hours. The chamber's air shifted. Several delegates leaned back in their tiers. Vexter's amber pupils narrowed. What do you want? I want to play you a recording. 2 of them, actually. The first one you have already seen. Your own people transmitted it as a trophy. The second is one you have not yet seen. I would like every delegate in this chamber to see both with their own eyes before we discuss the new charter. And after that, Brandt's voice was very soft. After that, Speaker, you will understand exactly what my government chose not to do, and you will understand why. She lifted the chip from the case. She turned to the central display. In the corridor behind her, 6 human Marines stood at the chamber doors. None of the council's guards could remember when they had arrived or how. Part 6, the demonstration. The first recording played for 9.5 minutes. It was the Tethys footage. Every council delegate had seen the parts the Cathari themselves had distributed as a notice to other client species. None of them had seen the version Brandt now played. This version did not skip the close-ups. It did not cut away from the hospital corridors. It did not edit out the passenger ferry. The translators rendered the final transmission of every comm operator who had managed to send one, including a woman named Ria Voss asking her brother to remember a sunrise. When the recording ended, the chamber was full of a quiet you could feel in your teeth. Brandt did not let them sit in it. For the record, she said, I will now name the delegates who voted in favor of the action that produced these images. She read 40 names. She read them in the original tongues. She did not raise her voice once. The Drevani counselor did not move when his name was read. The Cathari delegation did not move when their names were read. The Lyrian delegate watched the floor. 40 votes, Brandt said. 40 signatures on 80,000 graves. My government has copies of every vote, every speech, every private communication that preceded the decision. The Lyrian Republic was kind enough to share them with us 6 hours after the strike. We have been reading them carefully. The Lyrian delegate did not look up. He did not need to. Every Cathari eye in the chamber had already found him. Brandt did not pause to let them act on that. The second recording, she said. The display changed. It showed a Cathari forge world from low orbit, Kurtava. The display tracked the engagement Castellanos had fought there. It showed the orbital platforms vanishing. It showed the Cathari battle group surrendering. Then it did something none of the delegates expected. It zoomed in on a residential district directly beneath the orbital battle. It showed apartment blocks intact. It showed schools intact. It showed a public garden where Cathari children were still playing, while above them the keels of warships burned in the sky. The recording shifted to a second forge world, then a third, then a fourth. Each time it lingered on a civilian center untouched. 80,000 civilians on Tethys, Brandt said. 40 Cathari military installations destroyed. Civilian casualties in our retaliatory operation, 83. Of those 83, 51 were uniformed contractors working on classified weapons projects. 32 were technicians caught in the collateral debris of orbital platform strikes. She turned slowly, taking in the entire chamber. My government wishes the council to understand the following. Our restraint at Kurtava is not weakness. It is choice. It is precisely the choice your speaker did not extend to us. We can destroy your civilian centers. We can burn your homeworlds. We have the capability. We have the weapons. We have, after Tethys, the legal and moral authority recognized by every neutral observer in this galaxy. She let those words settle. We have chosen, so far, not to. We will continue to make that choice on one condition. Vexter's voice was hoarse, which is. Brandt opened the small black case again. From it she drew a single document, 12 pages, written in Avenari trade script. The new Tethys Charter, she said. It is non-negotiable. The Cathari military will dissolve as a unified body. Your warship production will be capped at 1/10 of current capacity, monitored by a joint observer council that includes the Lyrian Republic and the United Terran Federation. The 40 delegates who voted for the strike will surrender themselves to the Compact's own tribunal for prosecution under the Compact's own laws against undeclared aggression. Your tribute schedules over the past century will be returned to the species they were extracted from. She set the document on the petitioner's stone. In exchange, the Terran Federation will not strike a single Cathari civilian. We will not occupy a single Cathari world. We will not demand a single piece of your territory. We will, however, take our seat in this chamber, not as a client species, not as a protectorate, but as a full delegation with veto rights equivalent to the speaker's. The Drevani counselor's mandibles opened and shut, opened and shut. He found a voice. And if we refuse? Brant looked at him. She did not smile. If you refuse, counselor, my fleet, the one your sensors still cannot find, will begin to dismantle every Cathari military installation in known space within 72 hours. We will not strike civilians, but we will leave your military as a memory. Vexter's hands had gone white on the railing. He stared at the document on the petitioner's stone, then at the Lyrian delegate, then at the 40 named delegates around the tiers, then back at the small gray-haired woman in the charcoal suit. Diplomat Brant, he said, how long do we have to consider this? She glanced at the timepiece on the chamber's far wall. You have until that hour marker completes a full rotation. It was already 3/4 around. Part 7, the new charter. The motion to adopt the new Tethys charter passed with 38 minutes remaining on the timepiece. The vote was not unanimous. The Cathari delegation voted no. So did 6 client species who knew which side their fortunes were tied to. But the Lyrian Republic voted yes, and so did 33 other delegations who had spent years watching the Cathari and quietly hoping anyone, would do what humanity had now done. The motion was registered. The speaker affixed his seal, his hand shook, but the seal was clean. The 40 named delegates were taken into custody by their own peace officers and led from the chamber. Vexter of the Cathari watched them go and did not meet a single one of their eyes. The Drevani counselor approached Brant at the petitioner's stone after the vote was certified. He clicked his mandibles in a pattern that translators rendered as a formal request for audience. Diplomat, he said, your fleet, the one we could not find, where is it now? Brant picked up her case. She closed it with a small, soft click. Counselor, she said, my fleet is exactly where it has been since the Kartava operation concluded. Some of it is at the Lagrange points of your forge worlds, returning your wounded crews under flags of medical truce. Some of it is at our own borders. Some of it is at the wreck of Tethys Station, helping recovery crews search for survivors. She paused. All of it is visible now on every sensor in this chamber. Look. The Drevani counselor turned to the chamber's tactical display. So did 300 delegates. So did Vexter. The display was full of points of light, hundreds of them, larger than the Compact had assumed any human fleet could possibly be. Ships in formations no Compact analyst had ever modeled, many of them at locations no Compact intelligence service had ever placed under watch. Vexter's amber eyes registered the constellation of points and did not blink. Why, he asked very quietly, are you showing us this now? Brant's eyes were tired and not unkind. Because, Speaker, you need to know what you almost provoked, and you need to understand that we will not pretend it does not exist. The next time this council debates a corrective action against a smaller species, I want every delegate in this chamber to remember what their sensors are showing them at this moment. She lifted her case. Council is adjourned by my privilege of motion. Long live the Compact. She turned. She walked across the chamber floor, past the tiers of 300 silent delegates, past the Drevani's 6 folded arms, past the Lyrian delegate who inclined his long head in a gesture of respect Brant did not see and would not have wanted. The chamber doors closed behind her. The corridor beyond was lined with Marines, 6 of them helmeted in unmarked gray. They fell into step around her as she walked. At the end of the corridor stood a wheelchair. In the wheelchair sat Lieutenant Rhea Voss. Her leg was still in a brace. Her uniform was new. Her left eye had healed clear, though the skin around it was still pale where the swelling had been. She had been flown from Phobos to Council Prime in a Wraith-class courier, on Brant's personal request, to witness the closing of the chamber. Brant stopped in front of the wheelchair. She set down her case. "Lieutenant Voss." "Diplomat." "It is done." Rhea looked up at her. The corridor was very quiet. The Marines did not breathe loudly. Far behind them in the chamber she could no longer see, 300 delegates were beginning, in dozens of languages, to argue about what the next century would look like. "My wife," Rhea said, the words were almost steady. "My colleagues, the children in the schools. They will not be forgotten." Brant knelt with some difficulty, so that their eyes were level. "Their names are on the charter. The opening clause is the inventory of the dead at Tethys Station. Every species who signs that document will sign their names beneath those of the Tethys colony as witnesses. It will be the foundation of every diplomatic instrument the compact issues from this day forward." Rhea looked at the case in Brant's hand. "The recording chip you played, the Tethys footage, where will it go?" "To the compact's permanent archive. It will be screened at the opening of every council session, for as long as this body exists. Their first task each cycle will be to watch what they almost permitted to become normal." Rhea nodded once slowly. She did not weep. The weeping had happened already on Phobos. Right now there was something steadier in her chest, something that would carry her for a long time. "My brother," she said, "on Earth, has he been told?" "He was the first person Admiral Hayes called personally," Brant said. "Before she called me, before she called the President. He has seen your message. He remembers the sunrise." A long quiet held between them. Then Brant straightened, and the Marines around them resumed walking, and Rhea turned the wheels of her chair to follow. They moved down the long corridor of Council Prime. Behind them, 300 delegates of 41 civilizations were rebuilding the architecture of known space around the small gray-haired woman who had walked into their chambers alone. Ahead of them was a docking arm and a shuttle, and the slow journey home. Rhea looked up once at the high curving window of the corridor, where the stars of the compact's heart systems burned. Somewhere out there were the points of light her people had hidden for 40 years and revealed in a single afternoon. Somewhere out there were the homes of the families they had chosen not to burn. The galaxy would tell this story for 1,000 years. It would tell it differently each time. The Cathari would tell it as a humiliation. The Lyrian would tell it as a vindication. The smaller species, the ones the compact had bullied for centuries, would tell it as a deliverance. Humanity, in its quieter histories, would tell it the way Brant had played it in the chamber, with the Tethys footage first, with the names of the dead before the names of the living, with the inventory of what they could have done set beside what they chose to do. Rhea Voss wheeled herself toward the shuttle and let the corridor lights wash over her healing eye. The hour marker in the chamber behind her completed its rotation and began another. The new century had begun.